difficult situation. Although divorce was frowned upon in colonial times, that is where the custody system in America originates. According to Cordell and Cordell law firm, the first custody laws in the US always granted custody to fathers. But by the Industrial Revolution, custody was more routinely granted to mothers who were viewed as caretakers. In the 1960s, divorce surged in America, causing a number of joint custody laws to be enacted. Today, the 619 law firm in San Diego reports that all 50 states have laws allowing judges to grant custody to whomever they deem fit. But with this progress in joint custody, the stakes in the parental battlefield intensified. Dan Cunningham, a lawyer at Cunningham and Rhodes in New York, revealed in a personal interview that the three biggest harms impacting children in divorce are financial issues, the weaponizing of children, and the privacy of children being violated. Real harms and real children. Out of the 13.6 million custodial single parents in the US, 50.2% receive child support through an agreement settled in court, as noted by a September 2019 article from Verywell Family. Child custody battles often devolve into child support battles, with money as the center of attention and children as collateral damage. However, there are other tragic effects of divorce on children. Denise Main Graham revealed to On Our Sleeves, an organization funded to improve the mental health of children, that when her son Dre lost his life to suicide in 2012, she feared that it was because of the bitter divorce he was exposed to without availability of counseling. The American Psychological Association revealed that children of divorce are 14% more likely to attempt suicide than their counterparts. Aside from being attacked by their psyches, children of divorce can also be weaponized by those who are supposed to love them. In 2010, Caitlin Tagore left her abusive partner, Stefan Garcia. 5 months later, she received texts in which he threatened to kill their 9-month-old son, Wyatt. Although she showed judges these texts, according to the Deseret News, she was still forced to hand Wyatt over to Stefan. Stefan killed Wyatt later that week. If Wyatt's safety had been the primary concern rather than the official custody agreement, he would be 11 years old today. Another current story illustrates these harms even further. CNN, Vox, and multiple news outlets have been reporting on the Texas divorce battle occurring between parents Ann Georgilis and Jeffrey Younger. Their child, Luna Younger, identifies as a girl, according to Ann, but Jeffrey disagrees. These two parents, who cannot seem to agree on anything concerning the care of their 8-year-old, were awarded joint custody. Now, this absolutely infuriates me, but not for the reasons you might think. I'm angry because why do we even know this child's name? A second grader's privacy is being violated because the adults in the room can't agree, and news outlets are more than happy to exploit this situation. Is this in the best interest of the child? When researching stories and statistics for this speech, one element was apparent. Nearly every article that popped up on my screen was about how parents can win custody battles and minimize child support payments. Few mentioned the welfare of the children. Now, this needs to be changed, and fortunately, there are some actions that can be taken to do so. School counselors are one key element. In a personal interview with one of my school counselors, Lauren Post, I learned that all school counselors are required to go through extensive mental health training. However, according to NBC, Michigan has the highest shortage of school counselors in the country. In order to save children from devastating psychological issues, including those that result from divorce, We need more school counselors. In addition, Douglas, Leonard, and Garvey Firm noted that visiting a mediator before court should be mandated. This type of legal counseling can help parents settle some of their disputes before going into the courtroom, saving children from some of the trauma that ugly battles can ensue. Lastly, we must support updated legislation giving children a voice during custody battles. According to the North Carolina Judicial Branch, North Carolina has passed legislation requiring children be appointed a guardian ad litem, or someone who will advocate solely for their needs. This law protects the rights of children, gives them a voice, and preserves their privacy. Today, we looked at the current custody system in America, the harms arising from it, and what we can do to help. The child custody system has clearly improved since colonial times, but there is still so much more to be done. As a child of divorce, I can attest that I had no say in my living situation. And although I am still struggling with the effects of my parents' divorce, there are so many children out there who have it much worse than I do. There is not enough support for the Dreys and the Wyatts and the Lunas, who have been taken advantage of by the custody system. The divorce wasn't our choice, but refusing to take second place again is.
At 8:01.
Thank you.
Me too.
Would you like time cards?
No, thank you. Judges and timers ready? Okay. Think you're muted. Okay. All right. I love bingo. Something about the satisfaction of hearing bingo when you win is really rewarding. Even if I'm playing against 80-year-olds. You see, I love to volunteer at the Assisted Living Center. I have a favorite bingo buddy, Eddie. Eddie and I play games all the time, and somehow Eddie always wins. One Monday, I went home and counted up all my volunteer hours. I had reached above 200, which was honestly going to be a great addition to my college apps. While I was busy tallying up my hours, I forgot about all the fun I have with Eddie and was only focused on how it could benefit me. This led me to realize something. I'm not a nice person. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love helping people, but that doesn't mean that I don't have ulterior motives. Every time I do something nice, there's a switch in my brain that turns on and says, "You're a good person," or "You go, girl." And my personal favorite, "That's going to look great on my college apps." I know, this sounds awful, but honestly, I'm not the only one. Much of what we do is for ourselves, but society benefits from selfless people, or altruists. Today, I will be doing an act of kindness by sharing the real causes for our altruism. Then I will willingly sacrifice my time to elaborate on the effects of a fake altruistic mindset. And finally, I will selflessly offer solutions to becoming a true altruist. Our often misguided altruistic actions are caused by our ego, karma and religious beliefs, and our materialistic desires. First, ego. Whether we like to admit it or not, we lead egocentric lives. I, me, mine, these are words that constantly live in our thoughts. Now, altruism is defined as being a direct contrast to egoism, but we like to feel good. Scientifically speaking, there's something that goes on in our brain when we do nice things. In a 2017 study done at the University of Zurich, 50 people were given $100 over the course of a few weeks. Half were asked to spend this money on themselves, and the other half were asked to spend that money on someone they knew. The researchers then performed functional MRIs and found that those who had pledged to spend more money on others had far more activity in their amygdalas, implying greater happiness. And Dr. Ishaq, a professor of psychiatry at Cedars-Sinai, also notes the release of dopamine and other neurotransmitters as a reason for the helper's high. So essentially, we cherish the thought and feeling of being a good person, which is egoistic in nature. Another reason for our altruistic actions is karma and religious beliefs. For example, Hindus and Buddhists believe in the idea of what goes around comes around, that if you do good for others, good will happen to you. This means that often altruistic actions are led by the belief of religious merit in the afterlife, and good deeds are done in the name of God. Here, once again, the altruistic actions have an ulterior motive. And finally, our materialistic desires. When we think about elite philanthropy specifically, researchers in the UK published a study in the International Journal of Management Reviews. In this, they found that where the wealthy choose to donate their money is shaped by where they can maintain power. Instead of a benign form of altruism, the study argues that elite philanthropy is simply a way to translate economic capital into sociocultural capital. And beyond maintaining their reputation, this kind of philanthropy has other material benefits. According to Business History Review in 2019, tax deductions on charitable donations were made to benefit the rich. In 2017, the United States increased that proportion from 50% to 60%, directly serving the wealthy. In this way, elite philanthropy may seem morally guided, but is actually self-serving and a false display of altruism. Now, let's look at the effects of this I am a good person mindset. How has it turned true altruism into a joke? Despite the seemingly harmless action of doing good, when good things are done selfishly, there can be negative effects. In essence, it builds an extremely narcissistic mindset, which we can see in a study by Jonathan Freeman at Goldsmiths University. He found that 98% of British people consider themselves to be part of the nicest 50% of the population. But everyone thinking they're the kindest doesn't always align with their actions. This can lead to false expectations and disappointment. And this narcissistic mindset can extend to our society. We often elect politicians in the hope that they're running for the genuine good, but often they don't truly care about the people that they represent. According to political scientist and George Washington University professor Ethan Porter, state legislators are driven by party loyalty and not public opinion. A Pew Research poll found that 59% of Republicans somewhat supported the COVID-19 relief bill, but 0 Republicans voted in its favor. Likewise, only 89% of Democrats supported the bill, but it was a nearly unanimous vote. This type of party line voting affects policies on housing, healthcare, welfare, which all affect us. Politicians' ulterior motives always obstruct their work. With all this negative energy, how can we be truly altruistic? Is it even possible, or is society just doomed? There is no easy solution or fix. According to Dr. Sean Sullivan, a psychotherapist from California, shifting our mindset and being more conscious of the motives behind our actions is the first step towards change. Then we can attempt to take steps to escape that helper's high and try to be a true altruist. Let's look at some plausible solutions. For example, make your mom coffee and breakfast on a day that isn't Mother's Day. Drop off old coats and gloves to homeless people in Detroit every winter. Walk that sweet old bulldog from the animal shelter every week. And don't list any of these on your college applications. Even if your motive starts off as selfish, continue to push yourself to work at that animal shelter. What may have started off as a way just to calculate volunteer hours will turn into lasting friendships and an excitement just to show up. Today, we looked at the causes for our altruistic actions, analyzed the negative effects of a fake altruistic mindset, and I offered some solutions to becoming a true altruist. We're not all perfect people. I'd be lying if I said that I don't do things for college apps or because I want some sort of recognition. It's not easy, and hey, maybe when you're a billionaire, you could donate millions and still pay your taxes. But for now, maybe the next time you walk in to play bingo with your friend Eddie, you can walk in there as just a friend, as an altruist.
Thank you. I have 746.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next, we have 22. Would you like time cards?
Sorry, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Did you say something before that?
Would you like time cards?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'm so sorry. All right, judges and timers ready? "30 years ago, an event took place that changed my life irreversibly. In the late 90s, my parents immigrated to the United States from Iraq. They left behind their home, their family, their belongings, and arrived in the US with nothing but the promise of a better life. They believed anything was possible in America. They were dreamers. According to immigrationpolicy.org, 17 million families in the US share this story, but regardless of where we came from or when we came to this amazing country, there is a consistency among all of us, immigrant and non, that is glaringly clear. We've all been lied to. We've been told that the United States is the land of absolute equal opportunity. We've been told that anyone can do anything as long as they're in the United States. However, the biting truth is that the American dream, as we understand it, doesn't exist. Conceptually, the American dream functions as a great American lie, effectively dividing the nation. Today, we're going to go over the origin of the American dream, the lack of accessibility to the American dream, and finally, what we must do in order to facilitate a change. In order to fully understand why the American dream is so unattainable, we must first examine its creation. In a historical analysis done by conservative Mark Malvasi, he attempts to define the American dream through a myriad of other myths, those being the American Eden and the American Adam. The American Eden refers to the land of plentiful opportunity that is the United States, whereas the American Adam refers to the hardworking young man ready to make a name for himself. Further, in his analysis, Malvasi attempts to deepen our understanding of the term New World. Up until the late 19th century, the term New World was unprecedented. When people referred to the Americas, they simply called it a perfect utopia, a brand new American Garden of Eden. In Malvasi's analysis, it is clear that from the beginning, the American dream was only ever meant to be accessible to the American Adam. In fact, it was men who fit this archetype perfectly, white, wealthy, educated men, that coined the term. Now that we've gone over the origin of the American dream, we know who it was designed for. But what does that mean for the majority of Americans who don't fit the archetype? According to the Department of Homeland Security, in 2016, an estimated 3 million men and women immigrated to the U.S. We cannot continue to believe in the promise and transformative power of the American dream while simultaneously denying immigrants the right to that dream. For evidence, let's look at the lives of everyday American dreamers, DACA dreamers. Deferred action for childhood arrivals, this immigration policy allows some children of unlawful immigrants to remain in the U.S. However, this seemingly noble initiative has been challenged for years and continues to be. In the majority of states, it is illegal for DACA recipients to obtain a license, state identification, or federal aid of any kind, despite being required to pay both federal and state taxes. Up until a recent New York ruling, it was legal to discriminate against DACA recipients, and in the majority of states, like Michigan, it still is. The most innocent and vulnerable class of refugees, children taken from their homes before they could speak, are legally and systemically discriminated against. Of course, despite the rampant inequality in this country, some people do beat the odds, but those success stories are anomalies, not the norm. We cannot use them as justification for a broken system that unfairly targets marginalized communities. It's essential to understand that the notion of freedom and rising above your means are not uniquely American traits. According to the World Freedom Index, 159 countries have freedom. And within that index, the US is ranked 45th. In a recent study published by Stanford University attempting to measure the American dream, it was found to be more attainable in Canada. Even among legal US residents, the American dream is still unattainable. The rampant amount of inequality in this country calls out the American dream for the facade that it is. Ultimately, it was only ever real for the privileged. After going over the origin of the American dream and some examples of inequality, it's clear why this myth has remained relevant. The illusion of the American dream benefits those in power and those with pre-existing privileges by allowing them to maintain and justify their affluency. The American dream tells us that we live in a just world where good things happen to good people and good people only. By collectively believing this lie, we have placed the blame of being poor onto the poor and neglected to call out the many systems that actively entrap everyday Americans into cyclical poverty. In order to facilitate a change, if we have any fighting chance, we must look at education because that's where the problem starts. When your property taxes determine your quality of education, your story is already written. Concurrently, we must make education more accessible to the dreamers. The House recently passed the American Dreams and Promises Act of 2021. We must continue these initiatives by using our most powerful tool, our voices. We need to let our state and local representatives know that we care about education and we care about the future of this country because the truth is, the children and the dreamers are the future. And protecting them starts in the classroom. We can do that by actively supporting organizations like United We Dream and the Coalition for American Dreamers, both of which defend the rights of American youth, immigrant and non. Today, we went over the origin of the American dream, the lack of accessibility to the American dream, and finally, what we must do in order to facilitate a change. It is terrifying to notice the cracks in the world around you, but it is a more sinister evil to pretend there aren't any cracks at all. It is a dangerous privilege to continue to believe in the American dream because it deepens, invalidates, and perpetuates the suffering of our fellow Americans. However, I believe the most treacherous thing we can do is lose hope. Although past generations may have failed us, now it is our responsibility to forge a better future for the children, for the dreamers, and for each and every one of us.
Thank you.
I had 802.
I did too.
Me too.
Now we have number 33.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep, I can. Can I just say that if the for those of us watching, if the internet it looks like she's in a school, if the internet starts to go wonky, can we all agree to shut down our cameras?
I was actually, funnily enough, going to ask that because that has helped in past rounds. So I love that you said that for me. So
Could everybody but judges turn your cameras off, please, for this one? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And 2, I am going to want time cards, but can I only have 1, 30, and then 10 on fingers?
Sure. Do you want a 15-second card?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yep, can do.
Thank you. So with that all being said, judges and timers ready?
Yep, sure are.
Awesome. Thank you. Since very few of you know who I am, let me take a second to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Sagan. I'm 16 years old, I'm a Libra, and I'm fat. Now, please refrain from being shocked at this proclamation. Most people today, upon hearing that F word, immediately go to insisting that, oh, no, you're not, or even, aw, but you're so pretty, though. This pantsuit's a size 1X. I know I'm fat. It's taken me years to be able to say that with any semblance of confidence. And in the early 2010s, a movement began to gain momentum on numerous social media platforms that intended to help me and my fellow fat people feel this confidence about their weight. This movement quickly gained the moniker of the Fat Positivity Movement and rapidly gained prevalence both on and off social media. But over the course of time, the movement's primary message sharply shifted from its original one. Morbidly obese people began to ignore their decreasing health because they were perfect, just the way they are. This new toxic mentality is incredibly detrimental to both the people caught up in it and the people around them. And the consequences of partaking in this movement cannot be ignored. That's why today I'm going to discuss why the effects of morbid obesity cannot be dismissed, how not ignoring your health to promote false confidence can be self-love, and how easy yet important it can be to make the lifestyle changes needed to offset the mentality of this movement. The World Health Organization defines obesity as a normal or excessive fat accumulation that presents a risk to health. According to the CDC, the percentage of overweight or obese Americans was 39.8% as of 2015. And even though obesity is a health issue in and of itself, it can lead to a treasure trove of additional health concerns. These can include high blood pressure, heart disease, strokes, cancer, sleep apnea, and more. This is not just a little more weight around the hips than others. It is a crippling health condition that can lead to not only premature death, but the slow deterioration of one's quality of life. I would know. I, as a young girl, sat and watched for years as my now ex-stepmom, who weighed over 600 pounds, slowly deteriorated in front of my very eyes because she refused to accept her weight and the health impacts that went along with it. This is not a disorder that can be glorified simply because I'm beautiful just the way I am. Everyone has a right to feel beautiful in their own skin, but you won't be able to feel beautiful if you're in a casket. To quote Lizzie Cernik of CNN Health, suggesting that being a size 30 is just as healthy as being a size 12 isn't a body positive message either. It's an irresponsible form of denial. A majority of members in this movement tend to deny the possible effects of disregarding their morbid obesity by citing it as them practicing self-love. But the thing is, self-love is not falling into the toxic mentalities often perpetuated within the fat positivity movement. On so many corners of the internet, you'll find blog posts on websites like Tumblr saying things like your weight doesn't define your worth. Rooted deeply in this movement is the belief that you don't have to be completely skinny to be loved and valued, and that who you are and what you eat doesn't determine this value. And while this is completely true, you are not less of a human because you weigh more. This doesn't mean you can embrace self-love by disregarding your health. Clinical psychologist Deb Thompson states, obesity is clearly recognized by world and national health organizations as a leading risk factor for disease and death. The body positivity movement's denial of science is troubling. By ignoring our health to promote false confidence and unhealthy lifestyles, we are doing more harm than good. It is important to note, though, that healthy looks different for everyone. Appearance and wellness are not the same, despite what social media may portray. Someone who appears to you as fat might oftentimes be completely healthy, and someone who appears to you as healthy because they are skinny might potentially have an eating disorder. But if your weight restricts you from everyday movements or tasks, such as seen on nearly every episode of TLC's My 600-Pound Life, you are indisputably unhealthy. In order to increase authentic self-love, we must prioritize our health and take care of the only body we have. By evaluating our actions and vulnerabilities, we can improve our lives by making simple, small changes one day at a time. Basic healthy living improvements can change not only how you see your own self-worth, but the overall quality of your life. In a journal written for the American Diabetes Association, it's proven that even mild weight loss greatly improves both glycemic index, blood pressure, and lipids. So to put it simply, a person's quality of life and wellness. But the amount of weight lost correlates directly to the level of improvement. So the more weight someone loses, the more they can reverse the detrimental effects that morbid obesity has. And healthy living changes don't have to be hard. They can be as simple as eating a more balanced diet and exercising on a daily basis. In a scientific journal titled Health Benefits of Physical Activities, it's proven through numerous qualitative studies that daily physical activity can greatly improve both physical and psychological health. Embedded deep in this movement is the idea that it is healthy to accept where someone is in regards to their weight, no matter the number. But as stated by Deb Lemire for CNN, anyone at any size can take care of the body they have and support their well-being. Although the fat positivity movement isn't rooted in ill meaning, it can greatly affect both people who buy into it and the people around them. When people, like my ex-stepmom, believe that they are perfectly healthy at 600 plus pounds, they live in purposeful ignorance of how their weight is only harming them. Keep in mind, though, I am not trying to shame, insult, or humiliate people who are this size. That is not my intent in the slightest. My intent is to promote activism through education and prove that health and wellness are more than trends on Twitter or hashtags on Instagram. We must illustrate that the choices we make daily improve both our health and the quality of our lives. Instead of hiding behind the ignorance of a movement only promoting toxic behaviors, we must educate and learn to lead with science instead of shame. This education can take the form of informing students about the health impacts of obesity in health and nutrition classes in schools, or informing the general public through the social media platforms that this movement is so often found on. Now, you've been listening to me ramble on for the past 720 or so? But if there was ever a time to really listen to what I'm saying, it's now. The fat positivity movement continues to have strong negative impacts on our society's health as a whole, and the changes needed to offset this movement and other harmful ones like it can start off very simply with all of us. In facing the toxic nature of the fat positivity movement, we are standing up for ourselves, our friends, and our loved ones. We are creating a healthier, more enjoyable future where self-love and healthy living can weigh the same. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 757.
Yep, 757.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hello, 19. Would you like time cards?
No, I'm all right. Thank you, though.
All right.
And judges, you can see and hear me okay, right? Perfect. Awesome.
I think I am going to ask everybody to turn off their cameras. The camera is a little bit slow, just to make sure that we can make sure everybody has a good chance here. Thank you.
All right. Judges and timers ready? Thank you. I'm going to be honest with you. I rewrote this intro like 20 times. My introductions have always been my favorite part of my pieces, something I strive to perfect. Just last season, someone called me peanut butter and jelly girl because of the first 30 seconds of my piece. It meant that my words stuck, so I'll take it as a compliment. I knew I wanted to make my intro great in a time that has been so remarkably not. I'm a senior, and this is my last chance to do something I love. I found myself wondering, how could I make a great introduction when I have no one to make eye contact with? How could I possibly resonate with you when all we have is a screen? This speech is my best shot at answering those questions. I can still remember so many intros and quotes and hand gestures from the past 3 years I've been in oratory. I close my eyes and a supercut of speeches that have resonated with me plays. That phenomenon is more common than we think and is incredibly important to the human psyche. Resonance is one of the most powerful tools we have. When we resonate with something, we replace walls with bridges. We simultaneously see the world and feel seen by it. In this digital distanced age, we need to utilize our capacities for resonance so that disconnect becomes collective compassion. After explaining what resonance theory is, we'll reckon with the poignant truth that in the face of traumas which have evolved alongside us, the need for resonance is stronger than ever. Finally, after explaining how to cultivate a space for resonance in our minds and in our actions, I'll make the case for hope, a case for equitable communities built on authenticity and joy. In the field of sociology, resonance theory was first coined by German professor Hartmut Rosa. According to Rosa, resonance is a dual movement of affection, meaning something touches us from the outside, and emotion. We answer by giving a response and thus establishing a connection. In the simplest of terms, resonance is the idea that we can both feel connected to something and play an active role in forming that connection. It's a concept we're all familiar with, but giving it a name gives it power. It allows us to reclaim it and to use it. International professor of sociology Simon Susan puts resonance in perspective using 3 axes, the first of which is the horizontal or social axis. He describes horizontal resonance as family, friendship, and politics, a person-to-person connection. Next is the vertical axis, which deals with existential topics like art, nature, and religion. Finally, we have the diagonal axis, which focuses on the things we pour ourselves into, like work, school, sports, or forensics. A subject will have a good life, argues Rosa, if they can find and preserve resonance along these axes, but the possibility of that life is endangered if the conditions for those axes are structurally or systematically undermined. That compromised integrity is, in his words, a dissonance we need to listen to before we attune to resonance as a response. How that dissonance manifests itself is something worth taking a look at. Forge journalist and author Brianna West says that we breach connection because we construct facades of our lives that may or may not be honest reflections of reality. But what makes us want that guise in the first place? West argues trauma, which creates a damaged ability to connect with others. Trauma is not just used to describe the most horrific events we can imagine. Anytime someone experiences a frightening situation and does not get over that fear, trauma is created and becomes an influential force. The Global Dialogue, a sociology journal, warns that the veils of perfection we construct to try and mask our trauma give the misleading impression that the good life may be achieved through the accumulation of socially relevant resources. When access to those resources are blocked through institutionalized discrimination like racism, sexism, or bigotry, people lose the ability to form the resonant connections that keep us afloat. A lack of resonance is a domino effect. When we can't connect in one area of our life, many more are thrown out of orbit. There is maybe no example more relevant or raw than the COVID-19 pandemic. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of thousands lost the ability to go to school or to work, and also the chance to resonate with their friends, teachers, and coworkers. It's hit the most marginalized communities hardest and left so many feeling empty and disconnected. If you ask leading world expert David Kessler, it has left us grieving. Kessler was one of the first to write about the 5 stages of grief. In a 2020 interview with the Harvard Business Review, he added a 6th stage, meaning. He said, "I did not want to stop at acceptance when I experienced some personal grief. I wanted meaning in those darkest hours. As our world has turned upside down, as the most unjust parts of our society have reared their head, we found ourselves scrambling to connect with this new life. Because, as Brianna West points out, most of us believe a connection is something we earn by being good enough, when really it's something we develop by being willing enough. We need to be willing to use resonance, not as a goal to be reached, but as a tool to be held." City University researcher Kyung Mazzaro suggests framing as a solution to utilizing resonance. If you can frame your message in a way that targets both the strengths and vulnerabilities of your listener, you can cultivate active, intentional resonance. Anyone can practice framing, from writing school papers to recommending books or music to your friends. Framing is rooted in something the Harvard Business Review calls relevance, which focuses on resonating with your audience. But what happens when something resonates with you? At that point, it's time to turn to the late poet Mary Oliver. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. If something resonates with you, pay attention as to why and then share it. David Kessler's previous work resonated with him when, years later, he lost his son to suicide. So he gave grief workshops around the nation. Best-selling illustrator Mo Willems has always felt connected to art, and when art class went virtual, he invited thousands of kids to join live streams where he taught them how to draw his characters Elephant and Piggy. I was struck when I came upon this unconventional sociology theory from the 90s, so I wrote a speech about it. We need to utilize resonance because resonance makes possible the kinds of connections we humans have used to evolve for thousands of years. Along with Pfizer, it will make possible a post-pandemic world where every Saturday in March, classrooms will once again be filled with people who love what they do and love one another. But until then, I hope my speech resonates with you, and not for the fact that I was once called Peanut Butter and Jelly Girl. I hope my words allow you to reflect on the past and reimagine a future where resonance is a necessary and powerful force. I hope my speech makes you think about our tremendous capacities for grief, for resonance, and for hope. Thank you.
I had 756.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep, me too.
All right. And number 10.
Hi, just give me 1 second to set up my camera, but can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Hi. Judges and timer ready? Okay. Thank
Yep.
you. It was a cold December afternoon, the first time I heard Teresa Landrum speak. I was standing in a Detroit park at this environmental protest, surrounded by police. The first thing I remember about Teresa's voice is that it was strong. The second thing I remember is her anger. She speaks with more force and volume than anyone I know, despite the fact that she only has one lung. Landrum is a well-known community activist from the 48217 zip code in Detroit. She is a survivor of cancer, something that isn't unique or rare in her community. Both of her parents died from it, and some of her neighbors, as young as college students in their 20s, have lost their lives to cancerous tumors. This pattern of death and disease is not an unlucky coincidence. The zip code that Landrum has lived in for all of her life is considered the most polluted area in Michigan. From the Inland Waters Toxic Waste Facility to the Marathon Oil Refinery, industrial buildings fill the air and the water with carcinogens. To many members of our nation, toxic pollution seems like a phenomenon belonging only to developing countries and America's past. Yet, communities like Teresa's serve as evidence that environmental pollution is alive and deadly in the United States. It isn't just Detroit that's suffering. According to the New York Times, other cities like St. James Parish in Louisiana or Grace Ferry in Philadelphia share the same characteristics of high cancer and respiratory disease rates seen in Detroit. These three places are all predominantly Black, which is, once again, not an unlucky coincidence. Pollution in America is intentional with its occasion and deeply rooted in racist practices, a bitter truth we must come to accept before we can effectively tackle pollution. Today, I'll help you understand how racism and pollution are connected. Then we'll explore what causes this problem. Finally, we'll take a look at how we can begin to repair the damage. When I first met Detroit environmental activists, I couldn't understand how racism was involved with pollution. But the connection between the two is actually well documented. Environmental racism was a term coined in the 1980s, during a time where study after study revealed the disproportionate impact pollution had on communities of color. The landmark 1987 study, Toxic Waste and Race, revealed that race was the greatest determining factor of whether a person lived near a toxic waste facility. This is because during the midpoint of the 20th century, chemical plants, factories, and refineries often chose their locations based on housing maps that were literally redlined to show the most undesirable areas. Black communities were always redlined, which meant they couldn't get home loans or mortgages. They were trapped in communities where land values were cheap and therefore highly attractive to industrial polluters. When corporations arrived, they treated these redlined communities as sacrifice zones, filling the air and the water with toxic particles like benzene and lead. While redlining was prohibited in the 1970s, its effects still impact our country today. Black and brown communities continue to find themselves in the shadows of toxic facilities that spew literal tons of toxic chemical waste into the air. Opportunity knocked for corporate polluters, but the door they walk through is still open today due to a host of causes. The first of these is government incompetence. Let's take, as an example, poorly designed environmental regulations. In Teresa's hometown, all of the factories in the area actually comply with environmental standards. That's because the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality considers the plants individually instead of collectively. This law completely ignores the cumulative impact of numerous plants releasing pollutants into the neighborhood. In fact, a new study from the University of Michigan discovered that over 1 million pounds of hazardous chemical waste is released into the community each year. Another factor that contributes to environmental racism is the lack of institutional power held by those who suffer from it. When it comes to lobbying our politicians, let's be honest, the spending power of big polluters is unmatched, and many of our representatives are in their pockets. This makes it much harder to pass effective environmental legislation. And finally, environmental racism is exacerbated by the unchecked opportunism of bad industrial actors. Let's return to Marathon Oil in Teresa's hometown. In 2012, Marathon Oil completed a $2.2 billion facility expansion, which brought its toxic operations much closer to two neighborhoods: Boynton, which is 94% Black, and Oakwood Heights, which is 90% white. In anticipation of litigation from the predominantly white neighborhood, Marathon Oil began a buyout of Oakwood Heights homes, while leaving Boynton completely untouched. Today, the white residents of Oakwood Heights are gone. Boynton residents remain exposed daily to a plant which nearly doubled its production and pollution capacity. The places we have deemed sacrifice zones causes such deep harm to communities of color. So where do we go from here? How do we start healing the damage caused by decades and decades of environmental racism? First, we must explicitly recognize the systemic racism behind environmental issues. That means listening to community activists. Here's what Teresa Landrum supports: a comprehensive environmental platform that includes your typical decarbonization plans, but also prioritizes other issues like social justice and healthcare. We must also recognize that the medical effects from factories are generational, so the least we can do is provide health services like subsidized cancer screenings to those who live in polluted areas. But we can't pass any of these initiatives when corporations have such a strong hold over our government. Most Americans support campaign finance reform. So let's get our representatives to sign the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge, which binds politicians to reject campaign contributions from the oil and gas industry. This is just the tip of the iceberg for the numerous solutions out there. But it takes people like you and me to make them a priority. On March 25th, I actually met with Oakland County Executive Dave Coulter to promote a policy platform that I've been working on with the Oakland County Climate Campaign, which is a coalition of environmental groups from across the county. As a result of this meeting, Oakland County created the position of a sustainability officer who will work with surrounding cities like Detroit to promote environmental justice. The road ahead of us is a long one, and there are many forces standing in the way of meaningful change. But if we truly want to be allies to those who suffer the most from environmental racism, we must be willing to acknowledge its history and its legacy and get to work. To quote Teresa Landrum, I am telling you, this is a fight till the end. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had
I have 805.
804.
805. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that works. All
Thank
right,
you,
thank you so much, everybody.
Great job, everyone.
Congratulations on finals.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
so
you.
much, Liz.
Good job, everyone. Thank you.
It's so good to see everyone again.
Okay. All right. Thanks, you guys.
You too.
Thank you.
Good one.